Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. So today I will be presenting on introduction and research questions of our mini research. First of all, sex education is referred to high quality teaching and learning on a wide range of sex and sexuality related subjects. It looks at people's perspective on such topics, as well as the skills needed to handle interaction with oneself, partners, and community members, as well as maintains one's own sexual health. Other than that, sex education can occur in a variety of places, including schools, households, community settings, and the internet. Sex education should be provided at all levels of a student's education with information adapted to the student's developmental stage and cultural environment. Abstinence, contraception, and birth control, as well as puberty and reproduction, relationships, sexual assault prevention, body image, gender identity, and sexual orientation should all be discussed among students, especially in schools. Authorities should be the one who give the opportunity for the students to learn what is sex education and what to teach to the students about sex education. Sex education should be based on scientific knowledge of what works best to prevent unintended pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases. But it should also take into account young people's ability to obtain reliable information. In sex education, sexual development should be treated as a normal, natural part of human development. Sex education should be taught in school by the teachers, no matter directly or indirectly to the students, so that they will have awareness about what is sex education. Other than that, most of people think that sexuality education is something harm to learn in school, but it is actually important knowledge that should be learned from the early age of ones. Next, research question. So there are 3 research questions that we listed in our mini research. So the first one is, what are the parents' opinion and perception of sex education in school? The second one is, what are the factors that arise the need of teacher to teach sex education in school? And the last one is, what are the usefulness of sex education in school towards students? The objective of this research is to investigate parents' opinion and perception of sex education in school. Other than that, we need to determine the factors that arise the need of teacher to teach sex education in school, and lastly, to examine the usefulness of sex education in schools toward students.
Now let's resume with our next part. Next, we have literature review, and I, Rizwan Aris, will be presenting on this part. For this part, each student will have to give 2 articles, and then they will have to summarize it and then compare it to each other. Let's begin with our first and second article. The first article discussed on the public opinion on sexual education in US schools. In the article, it says that they use abstinence-only education, which focuses on the promotion of abstinence until marriage. This basically means that abstinence only teaches you that you cannot have any sexual intercourse while learning about it while your whole life before marriage. And they also prohibits mentioning contraception and other form of birth controls such as condoms, unless it is to mention their weaknesses and like failure rates. For this article, I think it focuses more on the abstinence only rather than the contraception, because to them you cannot have any sexual activities unless you are in a marriage relationship. Let's move on to the second article. The second article talk on the parents' perception, students and teachers' attitudes towards school sex education. It mentions about the parents' perspective in implementing sex education in school. The parents concluded in this article that the importance of sex education in schools is an unquestionable idea. So from this article, the parents mostly agree with the implementing sexual education in schools so that their child can learn more and know the consequences and the how to do it properly. Next is Article 3 and 4. The third article discusses whether Malaysian ready for comprehensive sexuality education or not. It includes how the public thinks on the topic of sexual education. Once professional even criticized that the syllabus in school only scrape the surface, as it is focused on the scientific term of reproduction and students are not given proper education on intercourse and its impact. As we know, the only thing that comes close to sexual education in Malaysia is science. We learn it in science. We learn how the intercourse is made and the menstrual cycle about women, but they don't even mention on the STDs that you can get from doing sexual acts or anything. They just mention about all those basic things and they don't tell you how to prevent having unwanted child before marriage or anything. But the fourth article, however, discusses about examining the effects of sexual education on young adults' sex behavior and health. 3 default approach to sex education in US, which is abstinence only, abstinence based, and comprehensive sex education. These are the 3 default ones in US. These approaches emphasize the negative consequences of sexual intercourse outside of marriage. So by teaching this, basically the student will learn the consequences that could happen if they do any sexual activity or sexual intercourse. So they will say that you could have an unwanted child or any sexual transmitted disease. So this is what is included in this article. After that, we move on to the fifth article, which includes the importance of sexual education from adolescent perspective, a study in Indonesia. In this article, it mainly speaks on the primary factors of the high adolescent pregnancy rate according to Ashima Emanuel and Moses in 2015. It basically incorporates a lack of parental care and guidance that is proven 46.7%, a lack of self-control that is proven 36.7%, and the lack of sex education 13.3%. It also relates and correlates to the argument of Papre et al. 2016, stating that he also agrees that those are the underlying factors of the high pregnancy among adolescents. As for the sixth article, it is about dispelling the myths on what parents really think about sex education in school. In this article, to summarize it up, it basically said that most of the parents agreed to sex education, that it should begin from middle school or even earlier. So in this article, most of the parents that is included in the article agrees that their children should learn sexual education from a very young age so that they don't do anything that will ruin their life one day. And for the 7th and 8th article, the 7th article discuss on how sexuality means sex and the opinion of parents on sexuality education in Malaysia. From the study, they found out that two of the participants say that the parents they are too busy and have limited time to sit together with their children, causing non-effective communication with their children. I personally agree with this statement because when you spend less time with your family, that means that they don't really talk about anything that is important because they don't communicate on a daily basis. So this will have a bad effect, have a negative effect to the children. And the article also explain while children who can talk to their parents about sexualities are not often involved in sexual activities and are more responsible in their approaches to sexual activities. So parents should really take in mind how their children are feeling or teach them some things about sexual education so that they at least have the least knowledge or the basic knowledge so that they can live their life very safe and healthy. Next, for Article 8, mentions about parents' attitude towards inclusion of sexual education in Malaysian schools. This article talked on the percentage of parents supporting inclusion of sex education lessons as an Islamic view on sexuality. That they also values the sexual abstinence until marriage and physical and social changes associated with puberty and adolescence, positive communication with family and parenting responsibility. So this article basically tells you about the Islamic views of teaching sexual education to children. They need to know that they cannot be involved in sexual activities if they are not married, and the social changes to them associated with puberty and adolescence, and positive communication with family, that they have to open up and talk to their family about their problems or how they are feeling, or if they have any question on sexual education, that they are able to communicate with their parents and ask their parents if they need to know something. And finally, for the 9th and 10th article. For the 9th article, it discusses on the sexual education in Malaysia, perceived issue and barrier by professionals. In the article, respondents believe that the Ministry of Education will encounter difficulties in training teachers, changing the textbook and incorporating the subject in school curriculum because the school system has adapted to an established procedure that may resist to changing. What it essentially means is that the schooling system or the textbooks, topics, everything is already incorporated inside the children that is in school. So just to change that in a blink, it will be very difficult to get used to, and that it may be very difficult to happen, and most probably unlikely to happen that the sexual education will be put into the education system. And for the 10th article, it is about why having sex education in school is so important. For this article, it mentions that by delivering comprehensive sexual education through both formal and non-formal education, both in and out of school setting, it is key to make sure that all children have access to the specific information skills they need. So this just says that it doesn't matter if you're learning sexual education in school or outside of school, as long as you are learning something and you are acquiring the knowledge, it is okay, and it is also encourages you to learn about it more, even though you're not in school settings or anything, or you're outside. You can ask your parents or your family members if you have any question regarding sexual education. So this is what the 10th article is about. Next is methodology and instruments. The platform that we use to interview varies depending on the person that we are interviewing. We use all kind of platforms such as Google Meet, phone calls, and by making a group chat on WhatsApp. For our interviewees, we have an educator, a student, and a parent. We ask them questions, open-ended questions that basically ask their opinion based on each role. So for parents, we need to know how they feel about if their children is learning sexual education. So it's basically like that. So as you can see here, I've provided the proof and the picture of our discussion from our interviewees. So I think that is it for our methodology instrument.
A very good morning to our beloved Miss Nabila and of course my fellow friends. My name is Nurin Erdina and my ID number is AM200700720. And today I will present the findings of sexuality in education. Before I start explaining about what the finding interviewee answers are, I have one question. Do you think sexuality in education is important? Do you know what the word consent means? Yes, I'm sure most of you know the answer to my question. Ladies and gentlemen, you might be wondering, why do we choose this topic among all topics? They say that it's not life or death, but I think that statement represents a fundamental breakdown of information, a significant misunderstanding about the power of education, because quite simply, sexual education is the difference between life and death for millions of girls around the world. We live in a world that is decimated by gender-based violence. An estimated 120 million girls around the world have experienced sexual assault at some point. Over 70% of women worldwide have been victims to violence because of their gender. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not millions that we're talking about. That's billions of girls. Overwhelmingly, this violence is cyclical and it starts when young boys grow up seeing how their fathers treat women and they grow up to perpetrate that, or women grow up experiencing abuse and many never realize that they deserve to be treated differently. And can you believe that over 65% of men in Malaysia doesn't even know what consent means? And when you don't realize that you have the power to autonomy over your body, it can be almost impossible to enforce it. And for me, gender-based violence is especially prevalent when it happens in school, from sexual harassment in the hallways to inappropriate comments from teachers to sexual bullying. And the best way to break that cycle is to break that cycle through sustained quality universal education. Today, I will guarantee that you will learn something new about sexuality in education. You'll get to know about how other people view sexuality in education. So firstly, from the perspective from the parents. Mrs. Halila Murni will live in a city while Mr. Nizam live in a rural area. So the first question that we ask, when you first heard about sexuality in education, what is your opinion about it? What is your thought about it? Mrs. Murni said that, I think nowadays it's crucial to have sexuality education in school. While Mr. Nizam, he said that, I never came across that word. And the way he explained it to me, to us, it seems like he saw sex. The word sex education is a taboo. Like, why would you want sex education in school? The second question that we asked, why do you think issues in sexuality education has been a rise among parents nowadays? Mrs. Murni answered, you see, Nurin, I'm a newspaper person. Every day when I read the newspaper, I've always seen headlines of kids being raped, abortion happen, and I, as a parent, is scared. Something might happen to my kids and they will make the wrong choice if they don't learn sex education. And I, as a parent, must take precautions step because sometimes prevention is better than cure, aren't they? Am I right? That's what she said. The third question that we asked was, why do you think that some of the parents are against sexuality in education? So Mrs. Murray answered that, I think particularly parents who come from religious groups are opposed to comprehensive sex education because they believe it violates their cultural or religious values and has a corrupting influence on children. Because when they heard the title, sex education, and the only thing that came across your mind was sex, you're going to teach my kids about sex? You're going to encourage my kids to learn about sex? You know what, step back, there's no way I'm going to allow that. So they claim that by providing this type of information to teenagers, you are endorsing and encouraging sex and risk-taking. Some opponents also argue that this type of information should be left to parents to teach their children rather than being taught in school, which she does not agree because she stated that she's a working mom and kids spend most of their time in school away from home, and when they get back home they're tired, and logically, do you think they want their mom or their dad babbling about sex education in home? She personally thinks that's impossible. So the fourth question that we asked the parents was, from parents' perspective, what are the importance of sexuality in education? So Mr. Nizam stated that he thinks that it's not necessary to have sex education in school because they're still young, and he stated that he can teach his kids about sex education when they grow older. So on the other hand, Mrs. Mooney, she stated that, there are a lot of importance of it. We can reduce the risk of HIV and AIDS cases, as well as the number of child abortion, because some of these infections do not yet have a cure, and the worst thing scenario that we will lose our child because of it. There's also an increase in abortion and child abandonment, and we must educate our child in sexual education in order to prevent them from becoming pregnant outside marriage, and also keep our children from becoming addicted to sex. Sex education lesson can help our children control their desires. So everyone, I believe that it's not only me. Every parent wishes for their children to be happy and healthy. So that is why, in my opinion, parents should always encourage their kids to take sexual education classes. That's what Mrs. Mooney stated. Second, we interviewed an educator named Mr. Said Mohta who teaches at SMK Sultan Alauddin Riyad Shah 1. The first question that we asked him was, as an educator, what is your opinion about sexuality in education? He stated that as an educator, he believed that sexuality in education is very important. Sexuality education aims to help kids and teens make conscious, satisfying, healthy, and respectful choices about relationship. A major goal of sexual education isn't to encourage sex among students, but when it comes to sexuality education, some teachers may face numerous challenges. Some teachers, for example, are uncomfortable to discuss sexuality openly in the classroom because they did not grow up talking about it, so they're hesitant to teach it. And second, teachers may lack knowledge and skill to explain and respond to students' questions. So they either don't respond, refer students to their parents, or suggest they research online. And also, teachers are unsure what can be discussed and because they're afraid of being misquoted, misunderstood, or having their words misinterpreted. And parents may file a complaint against the teacher if a curious student is piqued by a teacher's explanation of reproduction, such as online, and finds pornography. The second question that we asked was, do you think it's crucial to have sexuality education in school? So Mr. Said answered that I think that it is very crucial to have sexuality and education, as the number of cases in HIV, AIDS, and news of students being raped, they get pregnant and they don't know what to do, and it worries me. Some of them would commit suicide, and this kind of news has been rising among teenagers. So I think in this era, sexuality education in school is a must. The third question that we asked was, what are the factors that arise the need of teacher to teach sex education in school? So according to Mr. Mohta, educators must educate the youth. This includes sex education. I know it's a touchy subject for many, and for many reasons teenagers act impulsively. That's why they'll need a guide. They must be guided by educators. We must educate them on good and bad. For example, poorly educated teenagers are more prone to STDs. They have no idea how to avoid it. An educator can help them understand the risks of their action. They can also avoid unwanted pregnancy. Teachers can help them avoid bad outcomes. They must learn about consent. They need to understand that no means no. The rate of sexual abuse is alarming nowadays, as you can see. So that's why we need educators. For long-term prevention it is. So an educator is required to teach the youth what to do and not to do. So every choices they make will impact their life forever. So it is an educator's duty to educate and guide them. That's what Mr. Said Mohta said. Lastly, we interviewed a Form 5 student named Izzati Zahira. And the first question that we asked was, when you first heard about sexuality and education as a student, what is your thought about it? What came across your mind? So she answered, as a student living in this era especially, I think it's very crucial, it's very important to have sexuality and education. And she also stated that sexuality and education would bring many benefits, and she is aware that when they learn about sex education, it would be more than just learning about sex itself. We will learn how to prevent bad things from happening that will affect their entire life. The second question that we asked her was, what's your circle of friends' opinion when they heard about sexuality and education? She answered, many of my friends wish they had known sooner, because some of my friends has been raped and sexually assaulted in the past, but they don't know what to do about it, so they just accept their faith. And I felt sick to my stomach when I heard the news, thinking that if we had learned about sexuality in school, we would have known what the next step was that we needed to take. And in addition, she stated that parents nowadays, including mine, are working parents, so they don't have the time to teach their children about sex education. Therefore, it's a must to have sexuality in education nowadays. I must insist, she stated. The third question that we asked her was, as a student, what is the benefit of sex education? So she stated that one of the benefits was that they would feel safer, as they would know what to do if they are being raped or sexually abused, and it also can reduce teen pregnancy, HIV, AIDS, and they are aware of what's wrong and what's right thing in sex, where everyone's future is at stake here. That's what she stated.
Hi everyone, so let's proceed with the next slide, which is discussion. Sex education, according to sociologists, has various forms, contents and practice depending on context and culture, and it is generally part of the school curriculum. Unfortunately, there are clear understanding issues concerning the topic learning sex education in schools. When we did some interviews with those who are connected to the issue, which were parents, students and even teachers, we posed a few parts of question throughout our interview to look deeper into this matter. On behalf of the parents, we have asked 4 questions related to the issue. Our first question, when you first heard about sexuality education, what is your thought about it? For Mr. Nizam and Mrs. Murni, they come up with different perspectives. Mrs. Murni believed it was vital to teach her children about sex education, while Mr. Nizam, on the other hand, believed that sex education is a big taboo. After having a further discussion, we realized that their thoughts are related to their home, as Mrs. Murni lived in city area while Mr. Nizam lived in rural area. This would imply to the functionalist theory, which occasionally compares each aspect of the society system, as we learn from sociology of education. As for religious views, she relates religious parents oppose this type of education for their children because it violates their cultural and religious belief and will have an adverse influence. Religious views can be profoundly personal, but religion is also a cultural force. As some people believe, as previously stated, Émile Durkheim, a French sociologist, described religion as a unified system of belief and behavior pertaining to scared things. As a result, some people use it as an excuse to avoid learning lessons that would benefit their families. For the context of the importance of sexuality in education, Mr. Nizam thinks that because these students are still young, it is not the right time for them to learn this matter. We can relate the functionalism theory as we cannot separate the educational system from the society regardless of age, because this learning must be taught from a young age. When we asked the teacher about their views on sexuality in education as it relates to the students, Mr. Said Mohtar stated that this education attempts to help children and teenagers understand the consequences of getting involved in this situation in the future. It is necessary to use interaction theory in education to convey this topic of sexuality in order to achieve a good understanding between students and between students and teachers. Because of their same socialization, experiences, expectation, and culture, people who share a culture are likely to interpret and describe numerous social situations in similar ways. This is also true when it comes to teaching such a vital subject in school. We can prove this since some teachers claim that they are uncomfortable to discuss such a topic in class. This occurs as a result of both parties' lack of interaction skills. In our last interview session with a Form 5 student named Izzati Zafira, we asked about her first thought when she heard about sexuality in education, her friend's opinion, and what she will get when learning this in school. She, as a student herself, she wants to learn about sex education so that she doesn't get trapped. She also claimed that several of her friends wished to be informed about the issue because some of them had previously committed mistakes. They may be easily fooled by people's offers at first, unaware of the dangers that surround them. As I mentioned before, for rational choice theory, decisions are rational if they satisfy a consistency criterion set by a decision theory and are appropriate for achieving certain goals within the restrictions of the situation. They can make the appropriate decisions and avoid harm if they are aware of this beforehand.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Mirza Camelia. Now, I will focus on conclusion. Then, we will move to our individual reflection. Alright, as a conclusion, we believe that sex education should be included in the school curriculum. Children and teenagers require accurate information about sex and the risks associated with it from reliable sources. Sex education will assist them in properly preparing for the future and guiding them in making the best choices for themselves. In order to make the best decision for their present and future, children and teenagers need reliable and factual information about sex, sexual relationship, and other relevant topics. They must comprehend what might occur when there are sex-related myths, which can be dangerous. These youngsters are the one who will raise the following generation. So the introduction of sex education in school will be able to adequately prepare students. Not only that, as evidence and data collected carefully show that there are more benefits to learning sex education in school system than downsides, including lowering the rate of teen pregnancy, providing them with accurate and helpful information, and safeguarding them from harm. Now, we move to individual reflection. The first reflection is from my opinion. During this issue, sex education in school, I learned a lot from this case. To begin with, parents are stepping too far away from their children's education and blaming instructor when their children get into mischief rather than taking responsibility for something for which they should have had one in the first place. Second, if you haven't noticed, there are a surprising number of girls who are completely unaware of how their periods and pregnancy function. So, this difficulty has shaped me into a better instructor in the future. As a teacher, in preparing young people to enter society as responsible adults, teachers not only teach a subject areas such as English and math, but also how to be a responsible, law-abiding adult. Next, Nuria Irdina's reflection. She said that sexuality in education has been the talk of the town in Malaysia for years now. After she did her research on it, and it completely opened her mind to how different parties thought about it. She can see some parties agreeing with them while the other half consider the word sex as a taboo. But for her, sexuality in education is critical, especially in his fast-changing era. And as a future educator, she believes we have the opportunity to change the way we view every aspect of sexuality in our society. And we, as future educators, have the power to change that through education so that students in the future will not have to suffer as most do now. Then, Nur Ali Natasha reflection. She said, as she did some research about sexuality in education, she can clearly see that the fundamental purpose of the school-based sexuality education program is to improve young people's knowledge, skills, and behavior, allowing them to make responsible and safe decisions. However, she sees each major party having their own thoughts on how to introduce this topic to their children. But for sure, by providing students with the necessary information, comprehensive sexuality education empowers young people to safeguard and advocate for their health, well-being, and dignity. Next is Nurin Ayuni reflection. In her opinion, sex education is a topic that we should discuss on how we should teach and give them information to the young generation. This is because sex education always be seen as a sensitive issue that cannot be discussed in school. For her, she thinks that this action cannot be done by the teachers in school only, but the parents also plays an important role in giving the knowledge of sex education for their children to raise awareness about this matter. On the other hand, she also thinks that school is the perfect place for the student to gain general knowledge of what is actually sex education and how can they prepare themselves for the better future. This might seem to be something trivial, but it is actually give a really big impact for those who do not have knowledge about this issue. So as a future teacher, she really hopes she could give as much knowledge as she can to her future student. Last but not least, Rizwan Ari's reflection. This topic really helped him realize that the children in this generation is in need of all the education they can receive. As a matter of fact, the children now are more likely to be active in sexual acts compared to the oldies. This is just because of the advancements in technology that has made it easier for them to connect with other people. So, however, if they learn about sex education, they might get an idea of what could happen to them as a consequence to doing such acts. Not only that, they also will learn about family planning and how they can manage their family. In his opinion as a future educator, it opened up his eyes to the children and how we'll approach them so that he can advise them and give them help so that they don't go down to the wrong path. And that brings us to the end. So we would like to thanks to Miss Nabila for your time and for your attention today. So that's all from us. Thank you.